Will a fourth stimulus check cause even more inflation? The great debate circling around out there right now, which is exactly what I want to focus on right here in this video. I have all the details and what you need to know, so let's get into it right away. All right, the great debate that's been circling around for many months now. Will a fourth stimulus check cause even greater inflation above and beyond what we're already dealing with and have been dealing with for about a year now? Well, it comes down to a few different factors. Number one, depends on who you ask. Number two, depends on who you listen to. And number three, depends on a variety of other factors that we also need to take into consideration. So we need to compare all of these facts and everything that's going on right now to give a fair assessment, because on one hand, we could certainly say that yes, a fourth stimulus check would cause massive inflation. And on the other hand, we could also say no, if done correctly, a fourth stimulus check would actually have minimal inflationary impacts. So I do want to talk through all those details with you in this video and lay out all the different factors for you. So let's get right into this. However, really fast before we do, thank you so much for joining me. If you're new here or if you haven't done so yet, make sure to hit that subscribe button right down below the video so you don't miss any updates going forward, as I'm doing research all day, every day, breaking it all down into these short videos. As your one and only daily advocate, I truly want to help you out in any way that I possibly can, making sure that you're getting as much money, programs, benefits, checks, stimulus, and anything else that may be popping up right here, right now, or as it is being introduced in Congress, as there are new bills hitting the table on a very regular basis. So again, thanks so much for joining me. Please make sure to subscribe down below if you haven't done so yet, and let's get into it and discuss the answers behind the big debate. All right, so like I said, it completely depends on who you ask, what type of research you look at here, and of course, a variety of factors. So to be totally fair, I'm going to be looking at both sides of the argument on this, because we always have to look at both sides. So on one hand, we can certainly say that yes, a fourth stimulus check would actually cause massive inflation. So let's quickly talk about that first, and then I want to follow it up by saying, on the other hand, if done correctly, if they did this right, and if they thread the needle on this thing, they could actually get out additional stimulus checks, probably multiple checks, and it would have very minimal inflationary impacts. So I do want to give you all that evidence as well. All right, so here's what it comes down to. The last three stimulus checks that we received, the $1,200, the $600, and the $1,400 between early 2020, late 2020, and early 2021 did in fact cause inflation. Here's the thing. They printed about 40% of the money supply in the last 2 years. Well, when you print that much money, it's going to cause massive inflation. But out of all of those trillions of dollars, the roughly $6 trillion that was printed, only about $1.5 trillion of that was in the form of money that went out to the people. In fact, out of all that money, the $1.5 trillion or so that went out in the form of all these different programs, about $814 billion of it was in the form of those three stimulus checks. So out of the roughly $6 billion that was, $6 trillion that was printed, about $814 billion of that was actually sent out in the form of stimulus checks. So you can see a pretty small percentage of that money actually went out into the pockets of the people in the form of stimulus checks. However, we can say that possibly some of that $814 billion did cause some inflation, but it probably has a lot more to do with the other $5.2 trillion that was sent out versus the little $814 billion that was sent out into the pockets of the people through stimulus checks. So here's what it comes down to. Because those checks went out to such a huge group of people, in fact, those checks reached about 85% of the population. So that came out to be about 282 million people here in the United States. There's about 333 million people in the United States, and it reached just under 300 million of those people. So you can see here, it reached a huge percentage of the people. Well, there was also many reports that came out showing that a vast majority of those people that received the checks didn't actually need the money. In fact, they stuck it away in savings, or maybe they plowed it into the stock market. They bought crypto. They bought all kinds of stuff with it, therefore possibly driving inflation and prices higher because it was a lot of discretionary spending. However, the reports also went on to show that the low income and fixed income, those individuals primarily with an income below $50,000, actually did spend the money, but they spent it on the necessities: food, rent, utilities, paying down debts, things like this. More the necessities rather than the discretionary that the higher income people who didn't need the money were spending the money. Therefore, that's possibly where some of the inflation was coming from, right? However, here's the deal. So, like I said, I'm going to take the side talking about how a fourth stimulus check would cause more inflation, and then we'll take the side saying it's certainly not going to cause more inflation if they do it right. Here's the thing. If they sent out a fourth stimulus check and it encompassed 85% of the population, or again, about 282 to say 300 million people, roughly that range. If it included that many people, again, will it cause inflation? Yeah, you better believe it's going to cause inflation. Yes, it certainly would cause inflation because not everybody needs it. Again, it would be a huge plow of cash into the pockets of the people, and a huge percentage of those people don't need the money. So, therefore, it's going to lead to discretionary spending, and all of a sudden, a lot of people going out buying things because they have an extra, $500, $1,000, $1,400, whatever it happens to be. So yeah, that certainly would cause more inflation. So here's what it comes down to. Now let's take the other side and talk about how if they did this correctly, and if they thread the needle on this thing, and if they send out a fourth stimulus check highly focused on the low income and the fixed income, it would actually have minimal inflationary impacts. So now let's talk about this side because it's only fair to talk about both sides. Here's what it comes down to. In the event that they approved a fourth stimulus check, again, $1,000, $1,400, maybe $2,000, something like this, and it is highly focused on roughly 50 million people. Probably not even that many people. Realistically, it'd probably even be more like maybe 30 million, 40 million, something like that, but maybe tops 50 million people is what it would be focused on. Okay, now, would this have inflationary impacts? Again, depends on how much money actually goes out. If it's $1,000, it would probably be very minimal impact. If it's $1,000 going to, say, 40 million people, it'd be $40 billion. That wouldn't have that much of an impact, considering Congress passes $40 billion packages all the time. They're always blowing $40 billion on stuff, right? That's exactly what it comes down to. All right, now let's just say on the other side, let's just say that it's a $2,000 check going out to, again, 40 million people. It'd be $80 billion. Again, it's not like a ton of money. When it comes down to it, in the eyes of Congress, $40 billion or $80 billion is not that much money when it comes to Congress. They're spending tens of billions of dollars constantly on all kinds of different programs and all kinds of different things. So we got to take that into consideration as well. So the United States is sending tens of billions of dollars all across the globe right now to all kinds of different countries. So you can kind of see what's going on here, right? So if they actually did thread the needle on this thing and they do have a fourth stimulus check that goes out that is highly focused on the low income and the fixed income, here's why it wouldn't have very much inflationary impact. That money would be spread out so thin throughout the entire United States. Again, this encompasses about 333 million people across all the states and districts and territories and stuff like this, right? However, if we have, say, 50 million of those people getting a, say, $1,400 check, all of this money is spread out across the entire country, right? So the money is spread pretty thin across the entire country versus basically blanketing the entire country with tons and tons of cash like they did in 2020 and 2021, where virtually everybody was getting a check except for a very small group of people, right? So that's what it kind of comes down to. Now, let me give you a quick example. I used this example in a separate video, I don't know, a couple weeks ago, but I want to lay this out again because it's a really good example. The situation comes in where you have somebody or a small group of people that wins a lottery jackpot. Let's just say they win $500 million, right? They win $500 million, and it's a small group of, say, I don't know, 10 people, right? It's a work group, right? It's a co-worker group. They all pool their money, and they win $500 million. Is that going to cause inflation across the entire country? No, it's not. It may cause a little bit of supply and demand issues in their immediate area if they all want to go out and buy the latest, greatest Lamborghini. But other than that, it's not going to do anything to inflation across the country. It's not, because it's too small of a group of people and the money is not enough. It's a big lump sum that's going to a small group of people. The inflationary impact is virtually zero. That's the same thing with the stimulus checks here. If they were to actually thread the needle on this thing and send out $1,000, $1,400, $2,000 to maybe 40 million people, 50 million people across the entire country, it is basically a little teeny tiny about a little bit of money going out into the economies in all of these different states, counties, cities, locations all across the country. It's not this massive surge of money flowing into the economy where all of a sudden everybody is starting to try to bid up the same old goods and services. That's what basically inflation is, right? People with too much money chasing too few goods and services. If it's spread out across the entire country, it's just not going to happen like that. It's just not going to be the case like what we did see in early 2020, late 2020, and early 2021 with $1,400 and $1,200 and $600 going to virtually everybody that walks the world. Or sorry, not the world, the United States, right? That's the difference here. So if they were to do this properly, the inflationary impacts would be pretty minimal. It would not cost all that much money. It would not be $814 billion. It'd be more like, what, 40 billion? Maybe 50 billion, maybe 80 billion, maybe 100 billion tops, to provided they how many people they actually send this out to. So kind of see the trend here and how this actually works out. Anyway, maybe Congress will actually see this message and see, like, you know, how supply and demand and how inflation actually works. But anyway, hopefully this gives you a little bit better idea of what is actually going on. And in the event, will a fourth stimulus check actually cause additional inflation? In some cases, yeah. If they send it out to everybody, then yes, by all means, it would cause massive, massive inflation. If they sent it out to a small group of people, 40 million, 50 million people, a small fraction of the population, then yeah, by all means, we'd be good to go. The inflationary impact would be very, very minimal. Maybe a little bit, but for the most part, it would not run inflation 7% higher. It wouldn't run inflation 6% higher. There's no way. It would not do that. Maybe a teeny tiny bit in localized areas, but that's about it. That's not much. Anyway, hope this kind of gives better clarity into the big debate that's floating around out there right now in regards to a fourth stimulus check and, of course, all of these headlines that we continuously see all the time talking about inflation, the money supply, goods and services, the supply chain, all things like this. Anyway, hope this one helps you out. Make sure to subscribe down below if you haven't done so yet. Share this video with your friends, family, social media, and go back and check out some of the other thousands of videos right here on the channel. Thanks again. I truly do appreciate it. Enjoy your day. Stay safe out there. And until next time, make sure to subscribe down below and enjoy. I'll see you in the next video.